We want to say good morning to Anthony, Kristine. Good morning, Olga. Good morning to all of those who were able to be with us at this panel. My name is Pablo Ruiz. I am part of the School of the Americas Watch here in Chile. We also have a magazine with a very pretty name, which is The Right to Live in Peace. And it's a Victor Jara song, our great Victor Jara, who had been assassinated by the military dictatorship. Previously, first I want to do some introduction. First to tell you and all of our compañeros, compañeras, we're here trying to create a new constitution. We've been governed by the Pinochet constitution, and we want to recall that, well, the United States supported that dictatorship, and we will not forget that. Secondly, to tell you that Colombia is one of the most militarized countries in the continent. 110,000 troops have been trained in the United States at the School of the Americas. Hundreds of thousands of Colombians have been trained by the United States. Another thing that I wanted to recall to everyone is that in 2008, Berta Cáceres was part of a panel in Honduras. She was assassinated by several men. 7 of the accused, 2 of them were trained in the United States and the School of the Americas. I want to recall as well that in Bolivia in 2019 there was a coup, and as well 6 of the people that participated in that coup had graduated from the School of the Americas. They were trained in the U.S. To come a little bit closer in time, we have found out that the Colombian mercenaries were assassinated. Moise, 7 of them had been trained at the United States, 4 at the School of the Americas, WINSEC. So the training that the United States provides is a threat throughout the continent. We are fighting against military bases in Latin America. Guantanamo is open in Cuba. The Cuban government is demanding their government, that military base. They also have a jail. There is in Honduras, there's a base that has 600 men, and there's bases in Colombia. Also, the Malvinas, the United Kingdom, we are aligned with Argentinian cause for the Malvinas, and the presence of the NATO. This is an introduction, by way of introduction, because today we want to speak about other problems that deals with militarization. So first, I would like to allow Olga to speak. She is someone who has studied nursing. She collaborates with the Right to Live in Peace, our magazine. Olga, it's up to you. Hello.
Buenas tardes. Estoy
realmente muy
contenta.
I am very happy to have this opportunity to share with you on this forum. I am speaking to you from Brazil. As many of you may know about the tremendous health problem that we're experiencing here. I don't know if you all know that it is a chaos created by Bolsonaro and his military government since last year. He turned down 11 formal offers because he was wanting to get money out of that in order um, uh,
La contaminación por
to
COVID
deal
es
with
más
this.
eficaz que la vacuna.
He
Y que
has said that it is better to be infected by COVID than to take a vaccine, and that and if you take the shot, you'll turn into a caiman, a lizard. And he says that we're all going to die someday. So this is not. It is not just stupidity. This is a.
por eso, de verdad que en esas circunstancias no sería
And that's why, in these circumstances, it's not an exaggeration to say that
COVID
Bonzo
como
is utilizing COVID as a biological weapon. There are around
o
500,000
sea, más de medio millón.
deaths here in Brazil,
Entonces, en
more than
Brasil
half a
solo.
million
Entonces,
that are dying just in Brazil. So what's happening over here actually is a policy of extermination, and that's why we cannot avoid saying that Bolsonaro is a genocidist, international and national politics. And there's a lot more to speak about that, but we have very limited time. So I would like to speak now about what other topic might be worse than Bolsonaro for Brazil and Latin America. The increment of the military spending and the connection with Brazil and the United States. That is training. It includes other agreements, military agreements that place in check our sovereignty. In 2017, a year after the coup after President against Dilma Rousseff, the United States, Colombia, Peru, they did military exercises, joint military exercises in the Amazon with Brazilian army. This is something that never happened before. It's contrary to everything that had been determined before by the national strategy for our country. And it puts our territory
Entonces,
a dangerous situation to foreign invasion. So in 2019, Brazil and the United States signed a agreement for a space base. Besides threatening our sovereignty, it could be a worldwide danger because in this same year, the United States created a space force, and it's very possible in some future time they might want to place missiles in the space, and that's what the Alcantara base it may be for. That's what we are. This would make a reality a Star Wars, and more than just a science fiction movie. It might be a real threat. About that, though, we also should remember, and it's very important, that we should demand that there the treaty about space from 1967 be uh, observed. This treaty prohibits any nuclear weapons or any kind of weapons that may be placed in the space above the Earth. So now going away from space into our cyberspace a little closer, I would like to remind you that weeks ago there was a bombing. I'm sure that bombing against the press, I'm sure against your presses as well, about these attacks that have been happening in the United States and cyber attacks. This is um, we had never heard in our memory these hybrid attacks because this takes a focus of who is the principal responsible for these kind of violations. It would be the United States. That's very clear. I want to remind you in 2013, President Dilma Rousseff um, spoke in front of the General Assembly at the UN, talking about denouncing the espionage practices that came out in those years and by Edward Snowden, and that was in 2015, and it revealed more than the reach of these interventions of this kind of attacks by the United States. The U.S. defense has justified this resource, it needed for its national security. Although recently, really, we have not heard a plausible explanation about our mental sanity. What does a threat, terrorist threat to the United States, has to do? President Dilma and his ministers, her um, people, her diplomats, and her advisors, why should they have their telephones listened to, including their homes? And what does this say about the central also been uh, listening in from the National Security Agency in the United States? What kind of threat is the National Central Bank of Brazil to the United States? It makes you think. So imagine the situation the other way around. If Brazil had been spying on the United States, and uh, at least the United States would have declared war on Brazil. But they did not just spy on Brazil, but also to the authorities in Mexico, France, Germany, among others. For people who want to think that this is something that happened before, it's something that's not happening now. I remind you that May of this year, Newsweek said that the of 60,000 cyber spies. Also, a few days ago, there was a report saying that the United States is training young people from 12 to 18 years who speak Portuguese for them to take the first step to become cyber warriors. And maybe if they're lucky, someday they might be able to work as spies for the NSA. So this is something that's very worrisome. These are recent happenings. We also have to remember that the cyber the attack, the cyber attack against Venezuela in 2019 affected 80% of the Venezuelan population. 80%. It was an attack that had been to deepen the problems, the social and economic problems. I also want to mention the case of Cuba and how that has been manipulated by social networks to generate chaos, to plant hatred, and to accuse the Cuban government and to violate their human rights. Nothing is being said about the war against Cuba by the United States or against Venezuela. Economic blockade is a war weapon. The real person responsible is the government. I also would like to leave you with the thought that Cuba has had much solidarity with many countries in the world, not only by leading educators.
Outro assunto muy serio, muy importante para hablarmos también, que es la cuestión del armamento.
It's something very serious, very important that we speak about nuclear weapons. It's a very big problem. It affects us all. And there is just one country in the world that has dared to use it against another nation.
Es una tarea difícil recordar, Estados Unidos. Pero seguro que Kristine y Anthony aportarán.
I'm sure Christina and Anthony will be able to share more about this topic.
Gracias,
thank you very much.
Olga, por tu intervención.
Thank you very much, Olga, for your presentation. We're going to turn to Kristine.
De la Red Internacional No a la Guerra, No a la OTAN. Kristine,
she is somebody so with the group No to War. Kristine, welcome and go ahead. We want to hear what you have to say.
Thank you for inviting me to this important webinar. And hello and good afternoon, or more or less, good evening, because in Germany we are reaching the end of the day soon. And I will talk about, yes, of course, 4 points today about nuclear weapons, NATO, and as a global military monster, EU militarization, and 2% of GDP as target for military spending. As you may know, the US is the country with the most military bases outside their own country, around about 800, spread all over the globe, and the highest defense budget with almost $800 US dollars in 2020, which is 3.7% of GDP. But I think Anthony will talk more about this topic, and I will concentrate to other militarization causes like the EU and NATO, which are also threats to peace in case of the militarization. And I will focus on this point. And also EU members like France and only EU member France has nuclear weapons, and Great Britain has nuclear weapons but left the European Union. So we have 2 nuclear weapon states in Europe and 2 NATO members with nuclear states. And we have a lot of US nuclear weapons in Europe, round about 100. And nowadays, mankind is on the brink of a double suicide, as fast one by the nuclear weapons, whose modernization and armament is pushed by all nuclear weapon states, or a slow one by global warming and destruction of nature and environment. On July 8, 1996, the International Court of Justice in The Hague found that the deterrence of nuclear weapons and the use of nuclear weapons generally violates international law. Moreover, he has an obligation to conduct and conclude negotiations in good faith leading to nuclear disarmament in all its aspects under strict and effective international control. 4 years ago, 122 states conducted and concluded these negotiations. On July 7, 2017, the TPNW, Treaty of Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, was adopted, which entered into force on January 22nd this year, after at least 50 states ratified it. And this treaty was not only negotiated by 122 states, it was also negotiated with the civil society, mainly with ICANN and all member organizations of ICANN. And there were partners in these negotiations at the UN. Meanwhile, 86 states have signed the treaty and 45 states have ratified it. This means that nuclear weapons are outlawed under international law. Unfortunately, the Federal Republic of Germany is not a signatory, neither any other NATO country. Almost most recent meeting in June, NATO even reaffirmed the role of nuclear deterrence and clearly positioned itself against the UN treaty banning nuclear weapons. On the other side, however, German federal government declares a world free of nuclear weapons to a big goal for its foreign policy, but it do nothing to get rid of the nuclear weapons in Germany. And the other US nuclear weapons are located in Belgium, Netherlands, Italy, and all these 4 countries are so-called nuclear sharing with these US nuclear weapons, and this violates the non-proliferation treaty because this prohibits the proliferation of nuclear weapons, and this is not according to this law, and all these European countries have signed this treaty. The situation in Turkey is a little bit different. There, the nuclear weapons are still under the US control. And in Germany, the government is planning to modernize the airbase where the nuclear weapons are located. It's a German airbase Büchel with 260 million euros, and to buy 45 new F-16 bombers for 7.5 billion euros to meet the requirements of the US nuclear weapons. And also France and Britain are modernizing their nuclear weapons. And we have a coalition, Nuke Free Europe, which organizes in September a month of actions against the US nuclear weapons in Europe. And we will have bicycle tour connecting the nuclear weapon bases in Germany, Ruiz and Ramstein, the biggest US airbase outside of the USA, which is also responsible for the drone flights, and the other airbase Volkel in Netherlands and Kleine Brogel in Belgium. The nuclear weapons have to be kicked out, and we demand from our countries to sign the GBNW treaty and also to take part on the first state conference in Vienna in mid of January next year. Now I will come to the NATO. So NATO is the biggest and most aggressive military alliance in the world. And instead of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it should better be called Nuclear Terror Organization. At the latest, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, NATO, a supposed defense alliance, has become an aggressive intervention alliance that acts as a world policeman and tries to replace the United Nations. The result of all the interventions, often discussed as humanitarian aid, were always the same: lead to the destruction of societies and nature, leaving behind poverty, hunger, violence, and failed states. And at its NATO summit this year in Brussels, NATO adopted a new strategy which appears to be old wine in new bottles, as we say in Germany. The document reiterates the propagandistic claim that the alliance is based on the principles of democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law to promote stability and well-being in the North Atlantic area. In reality, NATO's history is soaked in blood. The military alliance and several of its member states have helped initiate coups d'etat and supported dictatorships. They fought wars worldwide, destabilizing countries such as Algeria, Vietnam, the Balkans, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, resulting in millions of innocent victims and so-called failed states. The new agenda will continue endless war. NATO 2030 employs a world vision in terms of threats with the primary aim of legitimization, rearmament, and global military expansion, even though NATO and its member states are often responsible for many of these threats. The report uses hostile language stigmatizing China and Russia as systemic rivals, with recommendations that will lead to growing confrontation. While there is no immediate threat from either country, NATO is ramping up propaganda to justify rising military spending, even though the COVID-19 pandemic is having a huge impact on government budgets. NATO is littered with imagined enemy images demonizing above all Russia and China. Non-military solutions without dominations and aggressions are unthinkable for NATO. This even includes challenges like climate change, loss of biodiversity, and environmental protection. And for all these, they are executing military exercises, huge exercises under the lead of US and NATO countries, with and NATO member countries and non-member countries. Recently, Defender Europe with Georgia and Ukraine together in the Balkans and in the Black Sea on the border of Russia. Talisman Sabre, a traditional US and Australian exercise, this year also includes forces from Japan, UK, Canada, South Korea, and New Zealand. And as observers will take part India, Indonesia, Germany, and France. And we have RIMPAC every 2 years, the world's largest international maritime warfare exercise, with last year 10 countries taking part. And also NATO still exists and need nuclear weapons and deterrence and maintaining nuclear arms, advocating for revitalization of nuclear sharing arrangements and critical element of NATO's deterrence policy. And NATO reserves the right to first strike with nuclear weapons. And NATO is a global alliance, not only about the North Atlantic, also it has connections like to Colombia, who is a member of global NATO. It had friendship agreements with Australia and New Zealand. It has a Mediterranean dialogue with all the countries around the Mediterranean Sea. It has connections with how do you say in English? The Arabic countries on around Syria and Assad and so on. And with all these countries, there are relations that they can need their military installation together. So NATO is not only in Colombia present, it's also present in the Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao Islands, because this is, belongs to the Netherlands, and also French and other islands around in Latin America, where NATO is, and UK is also on the Malvinas. And before I come to the end, I see Pablo make his camera on. I have to talk shortly about the European Union, because she's also a driver for militarization, because it's mentioned in the Lisbon Treaty that all members of the European Union have to increase the military budget annually to modernize and all their infrastructure and create better defense capacity. And they have the project PESCO, their country which like to work stronger together on military issues are working together, and they're planning with the lead of France, Germany and Spain, a new system called FCAS. It's, how do you say, it's a very 300 billion euros expensive projects, and the central project of FCAS is a new generation finder. Combat aircraft is also be used as a nuclear weapon carrier, at least, and it is surrounded by weaponized drones such as the Eurodrone, and swarms of drones is turned and connected in a combat cloud with other NGFs, with satellites, intelligence, drone and aircraft, tankers, warships, and armored unit in real time. Artificial intelligence plays an all-pervasive central role in the combat cloud. And this is a further automatization of war. Humans are not necessary anymore. The robots will do the work, including decision taking. And to finance this, the the NATO and also European Union asks their members to increase the military budget to 2% of GDP. But this is not what we want. We need the money for other things, to take care for each other, for health, security systems, for education, and social, environmental issues. And we have to overcome the militaristic logic, which is based on hierarchical power structures, and we have to replace it with a peace logic, a culture of peace. We need solidarity instead of competition and rivalry. And we have to come back to a common security, like the Olaf Palme report proposed it nearly 40 years ago. We need a policy of détente, remembering what we achieved in the 80s with this, but we have to adapt it to today's developments, for example, the climate disaster, respect and dignity also towards others must find its way back into international politics. With this, we can come to our vision of a peaceful, social, ecological, gender just world. Thank you for your attendance.
Muchas gracias, Kristine.
Thank you very much, Kristine. She is the co-president of the No to War, No to Tanks, working with many different worldwide peace organizations. I would like to next introduce and thank everybody who is speaking today, and who Kristine, who connected us with Anthony, who's an activist for peace. He's also a nurse, and he has been working many long time, since the 60s, working for peace. On the theme of nuclear weapons and the wars from Vietnam till today, has left a lot of dead. And a historian once said, Kaufman, 80% of people who die are civilians, people, everyday people. Anthony, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Thank you, SOA Watch. Your work is critical. Kristine, thank you. Everything you said is vital, is important, and I'm in total agreement. We need to get rid of NATO. We need an alliance to help save civilization and the world, face climate, face social justice. So you said it well. I won't repeat. And Olga, thank you very much. And I love the fact that you talked about weapons in space. There's a book I really highly recommend. I don't know if you could see it. It's JFK and the Unspeakable. Maybe it's upside down for you. JFK and the Unspeakable by James Douglas, which goes into the surrounding. John F. Kennedy, our president, in just 2 months before he was assassinated, went to the UN and said, we must not weaponize space. And he called for actually US and Russia at that time, the height of the Cold War, to come together to go peacefully to space. He wanted to go to the moon together with Russia, it was Soviet Union at that time, our ultimate enemy. So we have long examples of people who gave their lives to try to work towards peace. And I want to thank Adrian, our translator, by the way, and I want to thank Mary Jelinek of Pax Christi International, who referred me as well for this session. What we're doing here is we're making these connections, personal connections, and to me, this is the only way we can affect militarization of the world, by making these human connections one-to-one with each other. It's always been the answer to stop the fear, to stop the stereotypes, to stop the hate, is by making these personal connections. So I want to thank everyone who is watching today and listening. Listening is the key. I've learned everything I know by listening to so many inspiring people around the world. So I thank you. Thank you for giving us this time and this space. So yeah, John F. Kennedy, not many people knew it, but John F. Kennedy was working behind the scenes with Khrushchev, the Soviet leader. And we know this with Pope John the 23rd. We know this from a book called The Improbable Triumvirate. This is by Norman Cousins, 1972. So behind the scenes, Kennedy was reaching out to Khrushchev, President Khrushchev, saying, my right wing is pressing me so hard. They want to go into Vietnam. They want us in Vietnam. They want our nuclear weapons. This is crazy. They almost, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, almost blew up the world. So the two leaders, Khrushchev and Kennedy, knew this. Khrushchev also had his right wing that didn't believe that the right wing always thinks that military is going to be our safety and our security. So Kristine mentioned the TPNW, the treaty that just passed, the prohibition on nuclear weapons in the UN. I was really fortunate to be there, part of that treaty throughout. And I did 2 side panels because I knew I hope that conference would become a treaty. And if it did, I knew the first thing that would happen is our NATO countries in alliance would start talking about, this is naive, this is dangerous, these people don't know what they're talking about, they're interfering with all our hard work. The true security is we have a mechanism set up for our security. We knew that they would come out with these lies. So we had this panel to prepare ourselves for this attack. And we are all facing very strong propaganda from our military industries, not just the United States, by the way, in all our countries.
Yes.
The armament industry is extremely strong everywhere. And you are to find out what the armament corporations are in your country and do your best to turn that around. I have a good friend, Timon Wallace, who is a Quaker. He wrote a great report. It's called Warheads to Windmills,
Yes.
which basically these are the jobs that we employ now with our nuclear weapons system, several thousand important high-paying jobs. But these are the jobs we can create when we transform these to what the world really needs to deal with climate and our many social justice problems. So there are many, and that came out in 2019, three years ago. It was presented in our Congress. But the strong words of war, we are all together in standing up. And it is the one-to-one small individual actions that make a big difference here, people. So whatever you do is important. Reykjavik, we had this wonderful, where's that? We had this wonderful person, Gorbachev, come in the scene. And Kristine mentioned, but in Reykjavik, I had the honor to go to Reykjavik and look at this little house where he came and met President Reagan. And it's this one-to-one, once again, these are arch enemies building our nuclear weapons to annihilate the whole world together. We don't care about others, right? And Gorbachev said, hey, let's just get together and we can talk about this. And there was personal chemistry. They looked out this beautiful window overlooking an ocean, the two of them alone, looking at the ocean, talking about their families, talking about food, talking about life. And all of a sudden, two of these arch enemies started talking about, well, let's try to get rid of these things. And we came this close to getting rid of our nuclear weapons at that time, 1986, Reykjavik. Yeah. But Gorbachev wrote in his memoirs, I have somewhere, but in his memoirs, he said, but then an invisible hand came in. So a lot of people were doing a lot of work. We've negotiated these problems for many, many years. But an invisible hand, and we know now what that invisible hand, it's our industries, it's our capitalists that make money off of this industry, supported by, yes, NATO. And Kristine knows much more than I do, but most are allies that are democracies. They're people, when you do a poll and do a little education, 70%, 83% of the citizens want nothing to do with nuclear weapons. They want us to sign this treaty. I know in Germany, and Kristine knows, I think it's 83% of the people want our 20 nuclear weapons out of Buchel Air Base. And I do too. I was very fortunate, Kristine, to be over there in Buchel and to join hands and get arrested in Buchel. And I must admit, the Germans treat prisoners, or arrestees much, much better than we do here in the United States. But I was asked by Pedro to speak about something very important. Just local, everything's local, and it's what we do as individuals is critical. Dorothy Day, who in 1931, along with another, formed the Catholic Worker Movement, serving the poor, the homeless, the sick. She opened up these houses of hospitality, but she was steadfast against the machinery of war. She knew we spent most of our money on war. We still do by far, all of us, and we know this. But in the Catholic Worker House, and she was the first to put in writing in the stand-up right after Hiroshima. She put in writing in the Catholic Worker, the paper that still exists today, that we have just killed our innocent brothers and sisters, in the civilians she's talking about, thousands of them. We've vaporized them. So breathe their dust in the air coming over New York. This is one humanity. So she was a lone voice then, standing up. As we cheered the end of World War II, she was saying, wait a second, we've just annihilated these innocent people. Can we think about this? So she's from the start been against nuclear weapons and got arrested in the 1950s many times, year after year, going down to our city hall. Her granddaughter, along with 6 others, and got arrested by entering a nuclear submarine base in Georgia, our state of Georgia. This one nuclear submarine base, called the Kings Bay base, houses enough nuclear weapons in this one base to destroy our entire planet, or the humanity. The insects will live, but the humanity many times over, this one base. And people in the area don't even know it exists. It's don't ask, don't tell policy. So there are people actually that live within miles of this base, have no idea that there are nuclear weapons there. So they went into this base, 7 Catholic workers, nonviolent civil disobedience. They entered with a Martin Luther King banner saying, love one another. They went in prayer. Love one another, I guess, is a very radical notion, right? Everyone on this webinar must. So this is a danger to our state. So to the American military-industrial complex. So these people had hearings and a trial in which they were not allowed to disclose the horrors of these weapons, talk about them. The jury never heard the particulars of why, their motivation, their manifesto that they brought in. They also brought in a great book, another book, sorry people, but Daniel Ellsberg, The Doomsday Machine. They brought that in. This is 2018. They went in on the day of Martin Luther King's assassination, the anniversary of his assassination. He was one of our great spokespeople. We've lost many of our leaders who have spoken against the military-industrial complex. Martin Luther King was one. John F. Kennedy was another. He was trying to stop this machine, and they stopped him. So you need to be brave, and I thank every one of you for being brave, for being courageous, for being wise, for being in solidarity with each other throughout this. So anyway, they spent time in prison. Martha Hennessy will be getting out tomorrow from prison, 3 years on and off. Their trial was pretty much a sham. And I don't know much what else I could go on. I'm not sure of my time here, but let me just say there's a few. How are we doing on time? Should I wrap it up? Well, 2 more minutes.
Continúa un par de minutos.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you all for listening. But things happen in just individual ways. There's a bank in New York City. It's called Amalgamated Bank. It's 100 years in my local area here. And in talking with them about this documentary, which I did, and Pedro can link our links to the work that all of us do. But in this documentary, I was speaking to the bank, the vice president, about this 8 years ago. And they kept track of this. It's you form a one-to-one relationship with people, right? And this is how you build trust. It's the same with our enemies. One-to-one relationships build trust. And that's how you get rid of the need for militarism. But when the treaty was coming up, they put out an announcement that their bank would have no transactions and no investments in any armament corporation. None. From handguns to nuclear weapons. So they put this public statement out, and they're made policies to that effect. So that's one bank, and we're spreading the word. But this is what individuals can do, and thank you. We had an event in New York City. There's a St. Patrick's parade where everyone gets together and celebrates their Irishness, right? But they didn't allow gay people and LGBTQ people in this parade for many years. So the LGBTQ got their own parade together separately and did their own parade. So in this, after the treaty happened and became adopted, one of the leaders of that, the founders of that alternate parade, decided to have activists that were involved in the treaty here in New York, to have them speak at the parade. They did. That inspired a couple of our council members, people in our city council, New York City Council. Remember, New York City, this little town where I live, is the home of Wall Street. And it's the town of Wall Street, where all the money for these industries flow. But in giving that presentation, one council member, Daniel Drum, stood up and wrote a proposal for a resolution. That resolution went to City Hall. It got a majority of council members to sign on, and we're well on our way to that becoming reality. But this is how it happens, by one people making an action. So we're supporting the treaty. We're calling for divestment here in the town of Wall Street from our pension funds. So I just want to support whatever you do individually. Have faith that whomever you're speaking can spread the word in different ways, be it your local city council or be it your bank, or the bank didn't stand up against nuclear weapons because we had placards protesting outside the bank. It happened because trust was built with one or two people. And I think that's our strong card in all this. I want to thank everyone for keeping on. And one last thing, recently, the past couple of months, I've been speaking with some diplomats in Nepal. Nepal is a tiny country, as you know. It is surrounded by nuclear weapon states: China, India, Pakistan. That's it. That's its borders. All three powerful nuclear weapon states that they rely on for trade. And the US, we've been going to Nepal to climb Mount Everest since the 60s or before. And Russia. All these countries vying for power within Nepal. Well, Nepal happens to be the country where Buddha is born. And a few diplomats are saying, hey, let's remember the message of Buddha, compassionate for all beings. And they are pushing in their parliament. They signed the treaty, but they're pushing to ratify it. So God bless. Thank you for listening. Keep hope. And I look forward to your questions and hearing more from my colleagues. Thank you.
Muchas gracias,
Thank you, Anthony. You showed us lots of books, and we'd like to put them in the chat, but we want to remember to thank you and to thank those activists, the Catholic activists in the United States, and all the political prisoners. There's a lot of political prisoners in jails in the United States, and the movement against the School of the Americas has had many people have been prisoners of conscience in this long history that has been trying to stop the imperialism of the United States and the dangers. There's some commentaries. Jose Frias from the Oscar Romero asks, he recalls that Jose, myself, and other Chilenos, we were outside Cuestahuayo base denouncing and demanding that the U.S. leave this military base. And it was in Santiago. The Southern Command installed a base, and there were many protests. Secondly, thank you, Ricardo Cardona. Ricardo says that we must pay attention to weapons. The United States does sell a lot of weapons to parts of the world, Bolivia, Colombia. Lots of those weapons come from the United States, and some of them are tear gas or shotguns or bullets that sometimes happen to find their way in many countries when there is repression. Also, we want to mention the work of the alliance that we make with our friends for peace in Costa Rica, the people who work against militarization. They are now participating in this against the construction of bases. Thank you for sharing this forum. Freddy Sandoval from El Salvador, where the United States is a very large base. Freddy Sandoval from El Salvador says that this is a very important forum. Panel is a very good timing, and he says congratulates this initiative. Alfonso also says Colombia participates in interfering in training, and I spoke previously about their role in Haiti. So Angela from Colombia also says the role of the police and how they're attempting to make a global uniform force. And to add to this, maybe a few people know this, but yesterday there was 574 people that had died in the United States by police abuse just this year. And these are things that do not show up in the media because the media, hegemonic information. So before we go to our panelists again, maybe they can add some more commentaries. We'll do a 2 or 3 round each. To remember, Anthony, Gorbachev just signed the agreement with Reagan for middle range missiles. Unfortunately, that treaty, the U.S. got out of that treaty. They also got out of the Open Skies Treaty. These are very important treaties to control nuclear weapons. Currently, there's always one treaty standing, and that is the START 3, which was ratified by President Biden. So for us in this commission, we have been talking about this, and we have been worried about the nuclear weapon. So we want to do a round with your impressions, and if you want to add something else, we'll start with Olga, then Kristine, and then Anthony about these commentaries. Olga, Go ahead.
No te escuchamos.
Ahora sí.
Okay.
Sí, ahora sí.
Ahora sí. Bueno, más una vez agradecer la participación y el interés de
Very
todos
grateful for the participation and interest of everyone that is with us today in this activity, and also very interesting and very important the contributions of the panelists, Kristine and Anthony, in the comments. Wonderful to be shared with us. And Kristine, also, of all of these alarming facts about the NATO, the threat that it is to world peace. Also, you made reference to that we cannot forget something that's very important that is threatening us, and that is what Kristine talked about, climate change. You spoke about at one point. So this great threat that also includes the accelerated destruction of the Amazon that we see in huge records, Bolsonaro's actions, the destruction of the largest tropical jungle on the planet, would create an uncontrollable global warming. So I share with you a fact that's going to the last 11 months of last year to now, in the last 11 months, there has been an increase in forest devastation of 61%, which equals to the greatest devastation of a decade. So what that means is that from what happened in 11 months equals to 10 years as far as the devastation of the Amazon. And just last month in June, an area was devastated equal to the size, 3 times the size of the city that I live in. I live in Fortaleza. So just think about the absurdity of the size. So just in June, an area 3 times as large as my city has been destroyed. There is a number of places where there's a place that is the most lethal for land defenders. This is something else that it's real. And also something very impactful and that we don't see in any of the news, and I think very few people know. More than 100 tons. 100 tons. This was a fact, official fact. They were used 100 tons to extract of mercury to extract gold. 100 tons of mercury. So this is affecting people, the ground, the air, the rivers. And speaking of rivers, I had another worry, the Amazon River, which already in Peru, in the Amazon of Peru, close to the Amazon River, there is an installation of a military base. There is a military close to the Amazon River along with other installations in Peru and also in Sofocano in Honduras. It's going to have an offshoot of this, and they say it's a research base for researching infectious diseases. But this is really something very alarming because we have patients that are, yes, it is a military base, and it is something that worries us a lot. But in addition to this military base, they are researching, they're investigating, but there's not a clear, transparent process. So we don't know what they're really doing. It makes us very worried because it is in the hands of the country that has produced innumerable biological weapons around the world in order to use against innumerable countries. A number of our countries in Latin America have been affected. So I just wanted to share with you this worry that we should be alert to this problem. Thank you very much, Olga. Kristine?
No te escuchamos.
Sorry, I forgot to switch on my mic. I want to make some comments regarding this environmental question. We tried in Germany to really bring together the movements like Fridays for Future and other environmental movements with the peace movement, because all military installations and military activities are destroying the environment, even if they are only present because they, this ground is not useful for anything else. And also they are a huge polluter, not only in the air, but also in the ground. And I remember all the strategy about PFAS in the fire foam of the United States air bases around the world and in the United States itself, but also used by other military forces and firefighter and disturbing the environment. And on the other side, the military and the army are used if you have environmental problems like very heavy rain and flood from small rivers growing up to a huge river, like it happened the last weekend in Germany. It was pictures like Pinheiro from other countries from the global south, and it happens in Germany. And with this rain, died over 100 people, and still 40 are missed. And everyone called for the military, and the army should come and help and support us. And they was used to call for the army and not to see how we can increase our other support organizations for civilian support and to help in such a situation. It's not underlying this all militaristic structures like the army. And the same happens with Corona. They put for vaccinations the army to the vaccination centers, also for testing they use the army, and sometimes even in the hospital they ask for the army, and the army said, oh yes, we are our friend and we help you. And the peoples are used to see persons in a uniform, and that the military is everywhere in the streets and taking care for the order. And this, I think, is a very dangerous situation, and we have to stress it and really see that the voices will be heard, like Anthony mentioned, of these 83% in Germany who are against nuclear weapons, and also a similar percentage are against use of the German army outside of the country and against intervention wars. But on the other side, we have to see that this huge majority, which is against these interventional wars, are decreasing, because with all these advertising for the military and telling them, oh, you can have very interesting technical jobs and it's a good way to earn money, and the lot are accepted this thinking, and some are going to the military because they didn't find other jobs. But on the other side, if they are in the military, they change their mind and accept more and more also intervention and this aggressive military policy, and not maybe, I think it's not working, but the original original intent of defense, because I think you cannot defend or you cannot overcome problems defending yourself with violence, because violence will produce more violence. And there we have to be careful and to see how we can, we have to see how we can overcome this thinking that we can find answers in violence and not in peaceful conflict solutions. And so we have to go on. And I think it's necessary to come back again to the streets and make actions, and not only virtual like this one, how important I know that they are. And we had also, I think it's 2 weeks ago, a webinar from the campaign Stop Airbase Ramstein International Conference Against Military Bases, which was a hybrid event, and Pablo participated also there, and the others, some attended in person in Kaiserslautern in Germany. This also we need, but we need really the actions on the streets, and we make a bicycle ride around the airbase to address our wishes to get rid of these bases and the drone flight. And this we should go on in international connections, and then we can support together and can learn from each other and the different problems.
Gracias, Kristine. Anthony.
Hey, Kristine. Anthony.
Well, Kristine, you say it all. Thank you so much. Really, really so beautifully. So thank you very much. Another book I'm going to show you is the book on Dorothy Day, by one of her granddaughters, Kate Hennessy, and it's called "The World Will Be Saved by Beauty." So, and we have to remember to be compassionate with ourselves. These are the problems we are talking today can seem overwhelming, very oppressive, exhausting, and depressive. So I encourage us all to save ourselves through beauty, stay close to nature, stay close to family and loved ones, and nurture. And also, besides our protesting, which I think is important, remember the one-to-one connections. I think that's really, I learned this the hard way, because I was a believing American I got news for you. I didn't come out against wars. I came out believing what I was told. I was an American who believed in America. America would not do anything wrong, wouldn't hurt anybody. We were out saving the world. I don't know if you know that out there, but we were going to save the whole world. So Vietnam, we were saving the Vietnamese from those horrible communists that were killing women and children. That's what I grew up with and in. And it wasn't until 1968, really, where we started having these riots on our streets that we started waking up, and we lost a number of our leaders that were speaking the language of peace. They got rid of them. And that's when I just started questioning. It wasn't until, by mistake, really, I went to a rally on Wall Street. There was a rally happening. I went there out of curiosity. There were some Black Panthers, and there were some veterans back from Vietnam. And I said, let me hear, not through the media, but let me speak to some of these people back from Vietnam. So what I didn't know is our president, Nixon at the time, this is 1970, had told all the right-wing groups in the tri-state area that this little protest was happening on Wall Street, a couple of hundred of us, protesting the war. And these people, my elders, these people were all in their 40s. They were very old people then, 30s, 40s, 50s. But they were there telling us that Wall Street was connected to the war. And I didn't quite understand that yet. So I went innocently. I went still believing in my country, was doing the right thing. And I actually wanted to go. There was a time I wanted to go to Vietnam. I wanted to get in uniform and I wanted to go. I remember the Anthony that wanted to go to war. So that's still in me. I can recall this. But it's there where thousands of construction workers, all waving the American flag, surrounded us, thousands of them, with their tools, with their 2x4s. And they sent about 80 of us to the hospital. A lot of people got severely injured. I got very beat up. And that was the baptism. That's what kind of woke me up. And Wall Street, from the windows above us, the traders, they were throwing graffiti, cheering these construction workers on. So we all need to be awakened. And I don't know how we awaken those of us who don't know about this. They're innocent. I have friends that work for the industry. I have friends, relatives that work on Wall Street. So it's in conversation with them that we slowly get our points off. There was Archbishop Romero was mentioned by one of the questioners. And I just want to say that Archbishop Romero was on my screensaver. He was the face on my computer for several years while I made my documentary against nuclear weapons. I had his face on he was a very important inspiration to me. And I also, about prisons, you mentioned other people going to prison. Yes, I did workshops for 10 years in prisons on community building. But the Kings Bay Plowshares, the 7 that went into prison, they'll be the first ones to say, don't feel sorry for us. We're here to witness. They could have been shot and killed, by the way. They went in knowing they could be killed by entering a nuclear weapon base. But they also knew they would be in prison. So they're not saying, oh, poor us, we're in prison. Never once. They're saying, look at our brothers and sisters who are in this oppressive prison system. And you're absolutely right for pointing that out. Too many, we need to reform our prison system major. So anyway, there are many things to go over. I do want to say that Brazil and Chile had fantastic ambassadors back in 2017 that were on the floor speaking for this treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. I remember them clearly. I can't remember their name, but every time the ambassador of Chile or Brazil and other countries, but those two in particular, stood up and spoke up for this treaty. Remember, it was just a dream. Having this treaty was just a dream before it happened. It was a great day. It was a great day. But I want to thank your two countries for having representatives that really helped push this through. And Germany and the US, no, we did not help. Anyway, enough. I'll let other people speak. Thank you.
Maybe a short remark from my side. Is it allowed? Pablo? May I have a short comment?
Sí, sí.
Yes.
Don't forget that Latin America is a nuclear weapon-free zone since years, and you have to take care that it still keeps a nuclear weapon-free zone, because I'm not sure that about the policy of Bolsonaro in Brazil, what there will happen in the future and what is ongoing with the connection between Brazil and United States. And I think we should keep this. And the Treaty of Togo, I cannot express this city, but we should have this in mind.
Gracias, Kristine. Anthony me...
Thank you, Kristine. Anthony made me jealous with so many books. I wanted to show you the cover of an old something that we work on, the right to live in peace, something that we work with Olga. And so many people that use that place a little grain of sand to make this happen in Latin America for peace. Thank you very much, Anthony. I love that you show books. We could do a forum, a panel just on books. And the military budget, there's for hospitals and bases. Unfortunately, Latin America spends a lot of money, and the United States, far away, does spend a lot of $100,000, a lot of money in wars. But I want to thank Mario Venegas from Rebecca Zuniga, the coordinator for the Council of SOA Watch, Carlos Gonzalez, Maria Elena for the peace in Mexico, Mario Zamora for People for the Peace. Kelly is an activist for Teachers for Peace. So many compañeras, compañeros, and I want to ask you 1 minute, Olga, Kristine, and Anthony, to say goodbye, and then we need to wrap it up because we need to get out of here. Olga, please. Okay, so 1 minute, huh? I want to make a proposal. I want to make a proposal in this 1 minute. In the midst of all of these declarations, very important. I think it would be very important as a group of this activity to make a letter for peace, to send it to international organizations or something like that, to reinforce our worries, to register our worries, a way to let people know more widely everything that we've talked about today. All of our global worries, nothing localized. I remember Victor Jara, like Pablo has said, this is the title of the magazine is, he said something, this is the time that can be tomorrow, what we're doing here today with our worries, we might return. So this letter could be, it might seem like a little thing or maybe a myth, but it would be symbolic to pressure to get people to understand these themes that we've talked about today. It could be something that we could come out of this activity. So we would like to do today, the time that could be tomorrow. We could do some proposals based on these worries and to create this a real action. Thank you very much. I'm really very happy to share with all of you. Kristine, last words.
Last words, yes. I think it's very important to come out and to share this, also the recording of this meeting, and distribute it, and to promote solidarity. And for me, one real crucial point, if I'm looking to the Americas now, is the question of Cuba and Venezuela. And I think it's most important to support Cuba and to support also fights for closed Guantanamo, because I think this is really very important, because Cuba shows that there are other possibilities and other ways of life to live in peace, and they working to overcome militarization. And this we have to support and have to help them, because I know they did a lot of support and solidarity to all the other countries, and even to European countries in the COVID pandemic. There we have also in Italy, and I think in some other countries, Cuban doctors, and therefore this should be also in focus, besides to get rid of NATO, because with NATO peace is impossible. And hopefully we see us again with the next international webinar, wherever, whoever will organize the next one.
I guess I'll go. Thank you so much, everyone who's listening, and thank you so much, Pedro and Adrian. Beautiful. Thank you so much for getting our communication to a wider audience. And yes, Kristine, once again, Close Guantanamo. Witness Against Torture is a great organization that for 15 years has been trying to keep our mind on the atrocity of our prisons where we torture. And this is it's horrible. So thank you for mentioning that. And Olga, thank you also for just reminding us about how precious our environment is. I think of Pope Francis. When he first came on, he wrote his first encyclical, was all about caring for the earth. And here, and also nuclear weapons. You know, Pope Francis was the first one to introduce the treaty that I talked about, that we talked about. And he was the first, they were the first, the Vatican was the first to sign that treaty. And we're working on our bishops here in the United States, because we have conservative Catholic bishops. We have a few stars that are reiterating. So I just support everyone for speaking to your clergy, to your bishops, and getting out the word to support people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Pope Francis, who've been speaking for peace for a long time. You know, New York City, Kristine, is also a nuclear-free zone. I don't know, the New York City, yes, we passed the council resolution in the 1980s saying we're a nuclear-free zone. So
huge amount of cities, also in Germany, we had a lot of nuclear-free cities.
I hope, you know, China and Russia know that, and so we can, anyway, I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about ourselves and our own nuclear weapons. So we also passed the rule that no ships can come into our port, this beautiful port here in our harbor with nuclear weapons, but we have a don't ask, don't tell policy. So we don't know, and we won't board the ships. So anyway, I want to thank everybody very much for listening and being part of this. Please, if there's one ask I have, please work on your countries to ratify. If you want to take down the U.S., I would just please work on your countries to ratify this treaty. You know, that would be the most important way to affect our military industry, for our allies, to stand up and say, we're ratifying this treaty and we don't believe in your security and safety. It would be so important. So I'll support you, and I think we'll all support each one of you, but anything I can do to help your country, help my country, help your country, it's all together. We know that oneness. Good luck with translating all this, Adrian. Just God bless, and please take care of oneself. Love, stay close to nature, stay close to, keep faith, keep hope, and love one another. And keep fighting. You are courageous, you are brave, and you are wise. You're not naive. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a Kristine
Thank you very much, Kristine, and to the International Organization Against War and against NATO. And thank you, Anthony. And thank you, SOA Watch, who has supported this forum and all of the organizations. We have organized this with another step to organize this. Big hugs to SOA Watch and to everybody else. We maintain the struggle.
Bye-bye.
Adiós.
Thank you very much. God bless.
Muchas gracias. Bendiciones.
Muchas
Estou muito grande,